Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I had a little bit of trouble logging in there. I hope this is all good and you can all hear me and I'm live in the group. So welcome to the first live webinar that we're hosting actually inside the Reinvent community. We're going to be talking all about IBS tonight. This is the first time we've done a live quite like this. So Karen, my assistant, is going to be on hand to kind of letting people into the group and kind of dealing with any tech queries that might come up. I'm hoping there aren't going to be any. It should be fairly straightforward. For those of you who haven't met me, because I know there's quite a few people kind of signed up, my name is Rosie Letts. I'm a nutritional therapist and I'm a functional medicine practitioner. I specialise in digestive disorders and also weight loss and fertility. And this is a community that I've really set up to serve my clients and also those who are part of one of my online programs and also those who might not have decided to work with a practitioner yet, who could still benefit a lot from the information that's being shared. Tonight we're going to be talking about IBS. It's a huge topic. It's a topic that isn't talked about enough. I think it's an uncomfortable topic for many people, but I think by working through the process of how your digestive system works and what can go wrong, you'll be able to see that actually that there is a lot that can be done. I have suffered from IBS terribly myself in my late teens, early 20s, so I really understand the pain that's involved, and I'm going to share some of the solutions that really work for me and that I now use with all of my clients. So doctors call IBS a functional gastrointestinal disorder. So it is a condition where the digestive system isn't working as it should do, but there's nothing physically wrong. In reality, it's a diagnosis of elimination. So typically, you'll first of all you have some blood tests done, and then you might be referred to a gastro consultant who will do kind of a colonoscopy, endoscopy, and look for any structural damage. And when nothing's coming up, everything's coming back all clear, you'll be given the diagnosis of IBS. It's quite a frustrating diagnosis because it sounds like there's nothing really wrong, it's just IBS, which any sufferer knows is not the case. And so because there isn't any kind of physical damage, the conventional treatment focuses on controlling your symptoms. But in functional medicine, we understand that something is awry in the gut, even if there is no physical structural damage. And by treating the symptoms without actually addressing the root cause and putting in further investigations to find the root cause, potentially we pave the way to further problems, sometimes bigger problems, that can manifest as a result of not treating the condition properly. So tonight we're going to work through the major causes of gastrointestinal distress from a functional perspective, and I'm going to try and help you identify where your imbalances may lie by working through that process. We're going to pay special attention to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's a bit of a mouthful. We call it SIBO, parasites, hydrochloric acid, all the kind of common areas that you might have heard being talked about. I'm going to talk you through how you can identify food intolerances and whether or not they might be contributing to your symptoms. We're going to look at the role of probiotics and prebiotics as well in IBS. And I will explain to you which diagnostic tests we have available that might help you. So please post any questions in the comments. I will do my best to answer them. I might answer them at the end. I might answer them as we go through, but hang in there with me. As I said, Karen, my assistant, is on hand. So if there's any techie stuff, she'll be there. If you do have to leave us at any point, don't worry. This is being recorded, and I'll make sure that I send a recording out afterwards. So first of all, I thought we would just do a bit of a whistle-stop tour of your digestive system and kind of explain how it works. So the primary function, the only real function of the digestive system is to break down food, the food that you're eating, into its smallest particles, so that it can then, those foods can then be used by the body for whatever processes they're required for. We always think that digestion starts in the mouth, but it doesn't. Digestion starts when you start to anticipate food, and that's why it's really, really important that you enjoy your food. So if you walk home and you're lucky enough that someone's prepared a meal for you, or if you walk into a restaurant and you get that delicious smell, that's when your digestion starts, when you're starting to anticipate and appreciate food. And what that does is it starts your salivary enzymes starting to secrete, and that triggers other glands further down in your digestive system to kind of fire up and get ready. Food's coming. Moving on to your mouth. So once you start to eat food, you chew it, and that starts to break down, and breaking down the food into its smaller particles so that there's more surface area for your salivary enzymes to work on. So amylase is a enzyme that's secreted by the saliva, and that is starting the process of carbohydrate digestion. So it's a very, very important step. And if we eat too quickly, if we don't chew our food properly, digestion really does start to fail at that point. Then there's a process of kind of peristalsis, so movement down through your throat. The food enters your stomach. Now, your stomach is a very acidic environment. It's supposed to be very, very acidic. And the hydrochloric acid in your stomach starts the process of converting something called pepsinogen into its active form of pepsin, and this is the enzyme that starts breaking down protein for you. So the stomach is the primary site for protein digestion. Once the stomach acid reaches a certain level, that starts to signal for the rest of your digestive system to kick in and get ready, get into action. Food is typically in your stomach for about 1 to 3 hours, longer than a lot of people think. And after that, it moves down into your small intestine. And this is the primary site of fat digestion. So to break down fats, we require your gallbladder to release bile, and fats are emulsified here, and then the pancreas starts adding in its pancreatic enzymes, and again, these further the work of breaking down food and working on your macronutrients there. You should know all of these enzymes are made from protein. I talk about protein a lot. One of the reasons protein is so important is because, oh, hi, Andy. Andy never joins. Is because proteins make up your enzymes. So in the small intestine, your micronutrients, so things like vitamins, things like minerals, these are small enough to just be absorbed straight through the intestinal lining. So as soon as they're released from their fiber matrix, they can be absorbed and go off to do their jobs. The process of peristalsis continues from here, and at this point, the little villi on your intestinal cells start secreting further enzymes and also start the process of absorbing some of those micronutrients. These villi are very, very delicate, so they can be damaged quite quickly, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So once food's been broken down into its simplest parts, it is absorbed or the useful parts are absorbed through the intestinal cells, and they are transported to the liver. We think of your liver as your detoxification organ, but it's also has a very, very important role of storing nutrients, and as well as kind of breaking down toxic substances. Also plays a role in creating certain nutrients as well. So once they're processed by the liver, your blood can deliver the nutrients to all of your cells, and they can go on and do whatever they need to do in the body. There is some waste that hasn't been digested. So things like fibre, water's been digested at this point. So that passes through into your large intestine in a kind of semi-liquid state. A lot of the water's reabsorbed, a lot of the salt's reabsorbed, and what's left passes through into your sigmoid colon, and then ideally once or twice a day, that's dumped, and that's when you have a bowel movement. So that is the very simple, in very simple terms, the process of your digestion each stage. So the result of this is the carbohydrates that you've eaten are broken down into single sugars, and they're used for energy, or they're stored as fat. The proteins that you've been eating are broken down into amino acids and peptides, and then they go on and are used for enzyme production, muscle building blocks, etc. in the body. And then the fats as well that you've been eating are broken down into fatty acid chains, and again they're involved with vitamin and mineral breakdown and the synthesis of other very, very important processes in the body, and the waste is removed. So that is how your digestive system should work. Let's take a look at what can go wrong. So the first thing that can go wrong is that you don't chew your food properly, and we see this an awful lot. Any of you who have been to see me in the clinic, I probably asked you whether you ever noticed undigested food in your stools. It's a lovely topic, but it's a good indicator of whether you are, that first manual step of digestion which you have control over, whether or not you are doing your body justice really, and giving yourself the helping hand to break down your food properly. A lot of people don't chew their food properly. It's because we're all in such a rush. So I often see people eating on the go, eating on the bus, eating at their desks. In cafes, you see people working and eating the food. If you're doing that, it's likely that you're not chewing the food properly, and you are swallowing way too big chunks of food. Without that initial amylase release and carbohydrate breakdown, you're just not going to be able to. It's going to halt digestion of certain parts at that point. The second thing that can go wrong is that you have insufficient hydrochloric acid in your stomach. So the correct levels of acid in your stomach are absolutely vital to create the right environment for your digestive processes to begin. Without the right level of HCl, you can't convert that pepsinogen into pepsin, and protein digestion fails. There's no other opportunity for that to happen. Large proteins, undigested proteins, are very, very abrasive to your digestive tract. So if larger proteins are making their way down, there's nowhere else that they can go at this point. They are going to start creating inflammation, damaging potentially your very delicate villi, etc. The second role of the hydrochloric acid, other than to activate the pepsin, is to sterilize food. So food should be sterilized as soon as it enters your digestive system, and if it's not, when it passes down further, you can end up with GI infection. You can end up with kind of bacteria and viruses that should have been killed, passing down and entering into your system. Too little hydrochloric acid is quite a common problem, and one of the real telltale signs is heartburn and indigestion. So if the stomach acid isn't sterilizing your food properly, your food starts to ferment in your stomach. It's there for a few hours, And if it starts to ferment, it produces gas, and anything that produces gas starts to rise up, so it ends up pushing your stomach acid kind of up into your throat, and you can end up with that rising acid sensation, which often again occurs with very kind of fatty, heavy, difficult to digest meals. Ironically, if that happens, you'll probably be given antacids to kill the acid so that you don't get that burning sensation, but that kind of it furthers the problem really, because then your stomach acid is further depleted. So what causes low stomach acid? Chronic stress is the biggest thing. So you need the same nutrition to produce your stress hormones as you do to produce your stomach acid. So if we're highly stressed for long periods of time, our stomach acid levels suffer. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. Also, it doesn't have to be environmental stress, work stress, etc. Physical stress will do it as well. So often, if you think back to when your digestive problems began, very often it's after an event like giving birth, or having an injury, an operation. So anything that's going to cause your body kind of physical trauma, or a nasty virus or something like that, it shocks your body, and stomach acid production is negatively affected. The other common cause is vitamin deficiency. So zinc and B vitamins are needed in large amounts to produce the right quantity of stomach acid. So not getting enough of those in your diet, and particularly vegan diets, vegetarian diets can be quite low in those key nutrients. That can be a problem. Or if you are drinking too much alcohol, or if you're smoking, your levels of zinc and B vitamins will be very, very quickly depleted. So that's something you can do straight away, is think about, am I doing anything to negatively affect my nutrient levels? After the stomach, so we're entering into the small intestine again. Now, the intestinal lining is supposed to be a protective barrier. So it's made up of mucosa and bacteria, and it's supposed to prevent undigested food particles, or too larger food particles, or microbes or toxins or anything like that being able to enter into the bloodstream. Now, if your intestinal lining has become damaged for whatever reason, if it's become inflamed, then the junctions that hold your intestinal cells together can become damaged, and they can start to move apart. So they create this kind of sieve, where rather than just tiny particles being able to move across, larger particles start being able to move across as well. So you've got your bloodstream, your immune system interacting effectively with the outside world. And when that happens, your immune system starts to launch an attack against these foreign invaders. And this results in further inflammation. So we call this leaky gut. I hate that term. The scientific term is intestinal permeability, but again, it's a bit of a mouthful. I'm sure a lot of you have read about it. It's a very, very real thing. And if you have intestinal permeability, there are tests that we can do, but also using the 5R approach, the functional medicine approach that I'm going to talk you through in a little bit, there are steps that we can take to restore your gut lining and to heal that damage. So your body's got remarkable capacity to heal itself, absolutely incredible capacity to heal itself. And we just have to give it the space to do that. So intestinal permeability is the second kind of major cause of IBS. Once your gut lining is compromised and foods have been able to interact with your immune system, your immune system creates antibodies to those foods, just like it would if you were to come into contact with a virus. Your immune system would create antibodies to that virus so that if it ever came in contact with it again, it would be able to very, very quickly launch an attack. That can happen with foods as well. So say milk proteins or gluten proteins have been able to interact with your immune system, and your body produces these antibodies, then the next time your body consumes those foods, you're going to get a big inflammatory response. And that is how food intolerances develop. So it's kind of leaky gut first, and then food intolerances start to develop. I'd say that leaky gut pretty much always leads to food intolerances. And when I do food intolerance testing and I see, lots and lots of foods coming up, that's kind of secondary. First of all, we have to deal with the gut lining and healing that damage and restoring that defense for you properly. So the gold standard for identifying food intolerances is a medically supervised elimination diet. This is quite a challenging thing to do. In my Reinvent program, I work people through that process, so using templates and helping to identify which foods to eliminate and how to test for reactions, etc. The easier way of testing for food intolerances is doing a blood test, and the only blood tests I recommend are the Laurician, just because they've got the best reproducibility rates and they're looking for broad spectrum IgG, but I won't labour that point. So yeah, if there are foods that are creating inflammation and interacting with your immune system, you are going to experience symptoms like bloating, like pain, like constipation. But also, once those IgG antibodies have been produced, the foods start to set off a kind of a cascade of reactions throughout the body. So it's not just limited to your digestive system. You can start experiencing inflammation anywhere. So eczema, psoriasis, joint pain, but also kind of brain fog, headaches, really, really complex reactions, always sparked from initial damage to the gut lining. And celiac disease is a good example of this, because people are familiar with celiac disease. It's not an intolerance, it's an allergy to gluten. But when that happens, once your body develops this reaction to gluten, if it's not picked up quickly, and if you are consuming gluten-containing foods, it causes a lot of damage to those very delicate villi coming off the intestinal cells. It can blunt the villi, and don't forget, they've got a really important role to play in the absorption of nutrients. So deficiencies can start to develop from that, and that's why things like iron deficiency and vitamin D deficiency are associated and are more of a problem in people with celiac disease. It's the same with food intolerance. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, is a condition. It's not IBS. I'd say it's different to IBS, but the symptoms are very, very similar. So gas, bloating, diarrhea. If you're experiencing these symptoms, it's very possible that you have this SIBO. Now, the bacterial overgrowth occurs when the stomach, or intestinal pH is altered, or when an infection's been able to develop, or when your natural defenses have been compromised for whatever reason. So often taking courses of medications, particularly things like antibiotics and steroids, they will damage the microbes that are making up your intestinal lining, and so when that's compromised, bacteria is able to kind of grow out of hand, and the wrong kinds of bacteria are able to grow and proliferate. There was a huge study that found that nearly 80% of people with IBS were found to have SIBO, and when the SIBO was treated, nearly half of the patients experienced a significant improvement in their symptoms, and that really tallies with what I find clinically as well. If you suspect SIBO, your doctor can perform a breath test. So you can request a breath test from your GP. The only thing I'd say is that they're not all that reproducible, they're not all that accurate, they often give false negative results, so you can kind of be assured that everything's fine when actually there is a bacterial overgrowth. So by all means kind of go and push for that test. If you do get a positive result, your doctor will be able to prescribe antibiotics to get rid of the bacteria. But the other way of looking at that is through stool testing, which is much more accurate. And also looks for other kinds of overgrowth. So yeast overgrowth is another very, very common contributor to IBS symptoms. You might have heard of candida overgrowth. Very, very similar symptoms. Gas, constipation, diarrhea. Again, it occurs when your natural balance of gut bacteria and gut flora have been compromised. And the yeast and the fungi can multiply, and it starts to release these kind of rather toxic byproducts. So it can really make you feel sluggish and sometimes really quite depressed and low. And if you've got leaky gut, which is probably quite likely, don't forget that these byproducts that are being now produced are able to kind of leak into your bloodstream and potentially create further issues there as well. Yeast overgrowth is very commonly associated with sugar cravings and carbohydrate cravings. And whenever, I get used to people telling me that they're addicted to sugar. I can tell when people are actually addicted to sugar, and it is a really real thing for a lot of people. And if you feel like you've got a sugar addiction, it's very, very likely that there's a yeast overgrowth. And again, that's something that I would definitely get tested, because it's quite easy to get rid of the yeast once you know it's there. Parasites. So again, it's not a nice topic, but there are certain parasites that are very, very, very common now, which can cause IBS symptoms if they go undiagnosed. So I routinely screen my patients for parasites. I don't always want to get rid of the parasites, not necessarily. So there are certain parasites that potentially can live quite harmoniously with you. Actually, potentially there are parasites that can be quite beneficial, and it all depends on you as an individual and how your digestive system is kind of coping, and lots of other factors. So parasites can be a major cause of gastrointestinal distress, and they can negatively affect your stomach acid as well. So causing symptoms like reflux and heartburn, pain in the sternum. And they also can contribute to leaky gut and to food intolerances, so everything kind of feeds in. But it's not necessarily something that I would want to treat straight away. Again, once we know what's there, we'll be able to identify the kind of effective either prescription medications or antimicrobials to get rid of them. Okay, so those are kind of the main contributors to IBS symptoms that I see in my clinic, and speaking to functional medicine colleagues, I think that's fairly unanimous. Those are the 4 or 5 main top contributors. The good news is there is a very, very well-researched protocol that you can use to restore good health in your digestive tract. And I can't take credit for this at all. This is the functional medicine 5R protocol, but it's how I treated my IBS, or how my functional medicine doctor at the time treated my IBS permanently. And it's now the process that I use with my clients to help restore their gut function. So I just want to work you through it. It's really, really simple once you kind of think about it. So 5 R's. The first R is remove. So we want to remove all of the bad stuff, anything that's negatively affecting your gut. So much of gastrointestinal distress is caused by inflammation. So the first thing is get rid of any inflammatory foods. So things like gluten, dairy, sugar, processed foods, trans fats, anything that we know is likely to be causing inflammation, alcohol, tobacco, we can get rid of that, give your body a break. We also want to remove any infections. So if we've identified parasites or yeast or bacteria, we want to get rid of those. We also want to remove any foods that we have identified you're intolerant to. So these can be healthy foods. They can be foods that absolutely nothing wrong with, but they are causing a problem for you right now. And if that's the case, it won't be that you have to remove the foods forever. We just need to remove them for a period of time so that the antibodies can pass through your system. It's usually 3 to 6 months, and then they're gone. Your immune system effectively forgets, we repair the damage, and then we can add the foods back in. So phase 1, remove. So it might be good to grab a pen and paper at some point and just think about all the things that might be negatively affecting your gut health and try and remove them. The second thing is replace. So if we've identified that your stomach acid is compromised, or if through testing, say you've got greasy stools, there's lots of fat coming out, you're not breaking down fat properly. Why might that be? Well, probably because there's a deficiency in bile or the enzymes that are required to break down that fat. So once we've identified that, we want to replace those. So replacing the stomach acid, replacing the enzymes, and this isn't necessarily through actually, providing the acid and the enzymes. We can do that. That might be the approach that I use. But for you, if you're trying to work on this yourself, think about, why is your stomach acid low? Is it because I'm stressed? I need to try and manage that stress. Is it because you're deficient in certain nutrients? Have you been a smoker for a long time? Your zinc levels are probably on the floor, so we need to provide some zinc. What are zinc-rich foods, etc. So we're trying to identify what's missing, and then we're going to add that back in to assist your body, give it that helping hand so that it can start to digest food properly. Joe, thank you for your comment. I will answer that in a sec. The third phase is repair. So once we have removed the problem foods and we've replaced what we need to assist your body to move through those processes of digestion that I've been through with you, we need to repair the damage to your gut lining. Now, as I said before, your body's got the most incredible capacity to heal. Just think, if you fall over and you badly graze your arm, your skin's ripped, it can be raw, and that's going to heal. Your body's got the capacity to do that. You just need to leave it alone, basically. If you keep scratching it, it's like we tell children, if you keep scratching it and you keep fiddling with it, it's not going to heal properly. But if you just give it space, you keep it clean, that's going to heal itself. It's exactly the same with your intestinal lining. It can heal itself. But what we can do is give it a helping hand. So think about what those gut cells need to replicate and to repair. So they need a protein called collagen. Collagen is a major structural protein in your body, and we find it in meat that's close to the bone. We find it in marine sources. And we can help your body to synthesize it by providing zinc and vitamin C. You could also take a collagen powder to give yourself a nice big hit of collagen on a regular basis. And I like to recommend to my clients who A, eat meat, and B, aren't squeamish, that they start making bone broths, because that is the best way to get a big hit of collagen into your daily diet. So making a nice roast chicken or something, and then using the carcass, popping it in the slow cooker, making a really good gelatinous broth, and then using that as the base for soups, etc. L-glutamine is another protein that we use for restoring gut cell health, and again, you find it in meat and in fish and in other protein sources. Protein's key. It doesn't have to be from animal sources. Lentils and beans and things will do, but you need to be getting enough protein. Also, there are certain food groups that are going to help to kind of soothe and calm. So things like aloe vera, it's incredibly soothing. Things like slippery elm or marshmallow root. So you can use these to kind of take the pressure off and to lubricate and to assist with the healing of your gut cells. I could go on and on. If you download the guide that I'm going to post later, I'll go into this at a bit more detail. But yeah, the third stage is repair. So once your gut isn't leaky anymore, once the permeability has been restored to the level that it should be, hallelujah, your symptoms are going to be feeling so much better at this point. And then the next thing that we need to do is re-inoculate. So your microbiome makes up part of that protective barrier around your intestines, and it's the bacteria in your gut protect you against viruses and bacteria and diseases and all sorts of things, and we need to keep those levels really, really healthy. It's likely if you've got IBS that your beneficial bacteria levels are low, they're compromised. You shouldn't start taking probiotics right away, because if you've got intestinal permeability, the bacteria can start to cause more problems. So I really need to stress that the probiotics part of things comes later. It comes after the repair stage. People get that wrong. But now's the time to add in bacteria. So I like to do this with fermented foods when possible. So things like kefir is my favourite. So fermented milk drink, or you can use coconut milk or soy milk. You can make it at home. It costs virtually nothing, and it's a really, really powerful gut tonic. Things like sauerkraut and miso and kimchi, these are all naturally fermented foods that should form a big part of our diet. We used to have pickles, I think, are our like native fermented food, and now they're not properly fermented. It's all shortcuts, isn't it? So adding back in those fermented foods is really, really important. Even if you haven't got IBS, we should all be consuming fermented foods. There are also supplements that you can use. Now, probiotics is a big business now, and some of the claims aren't really backed up, and some of the companies aren't what they're cracked up to be, in my opinion. So I recommend Proven Probiotics. They are a UK-based company. Their research is incredible. They're always researching new strains, etc. They are relatively cheap, actually, really, really affordable. They're what I use, what my kids use. And actually, I've forgotten, they've donated 3 of you a 3-month supply of probiotics. So I'll announce that tomorrow, see who's won. But yes, so adding in probiotics. It's not just about probiotics. So probiotics is the actual bacteria that we're adding back in, but don't forget we need to feed the probiotics. And probiotics like to eat plant fibers, basically. So it's one of the reasons I'm always talking about fruit and vegetables. So they contain the food for your gut bacteria. And if you're supplementing probiotics, it's a good idea to use a supplement that contains prebiotics as well, to give them a fighting chance of actually colonizing when they get into your gut. So we've got remove, replace, repair, re-inoculate, and finally, rebalance. This is the one that people forget. It's probably because it's the hardest. So rebalance is it's more about your lifestyle. It's more about thinking about what occurred to trigger these events and how we can prevent that happening again. So if, and again, it comes back to the point that so much of this is caused by the chronic stress or trauma. So what can you do to create more balance in your life? How can you bring down your stress levels? How can you increase your body's resilience to stress? How can you make sure you're sleeping better? Because if you sleep better, your body has the time to regenerate and repair. How can you be a bit more mindful? How can you bring that mindfulness into your eating practice so that you're chewing your food better, etc., etc. So yeah, lifestyle change. And for this, I like to recommend guided meditations. Absolutely love. Relax Me Happy is my go-to, and all my Reinvent members get free access to Sophie's amazing guided meditations and visualizations. Yoga, whatever works for you. Sleep hygiene is really, really important as well. So yeah, final stage is restore, and it's really important not to forget that stage. So all of the imbalances that we've worked through, all of the common causes of gastrointestinal distress can be tested for. I wouldn't recommend going away and doing loads and loads of comprehensive testing before you've had a chance to kind of work through that process and have a really good think about where your imbalances lie. So when I see clients in clinic, I spend a good 45 minutes working through that process basically and trying to understand for myself what might be going on in your lifestyle, in your environment, in your medical history to actually, you know, trigger the imbalances, and therefore where might they lie. Otherwise testing can get a bit expensive. But through comprehensive stool testing, we can see what your stomach acid is like. Is it strong enough? Whether you're secreting appropriate enzymes. We can see if your gut lining is too permeable. We can see if there's any kind of overgrowth, what that overgrowth is, if there's any kind of infection. So we can get a really, really good picture of what's going on from a functional perspective through stool testing. And also food intolerance testing is available. It's really, really easy to use. So if you want to talk about that, there's a load of information on testing on my website. I'm happy to answer any questions now, or drop me an email or book a call on the website and we can go through that. And I know I've shared loads of technical information tonight, so if you want to recap on any of the process or anything that can go wrong, I'm going to post my digestive wellness guide underneath the video, and you can download that and look through it at your own pace. It doesn't cover everything, but it covers the basics, so it will be a good place to get started. Right, I'm going to answer some questions. Joe, how long after you've eaten a food do you know if you are getting any negative symptoms from it? This is why food intolerance is so hard to diagnose, Joe, I'm afraid. It can be minutes or it can be days, depending on what the reaction is. Food intolerances are really, really difficult to identify, and that's why we have to go through either this elimination diet where you eliminate the food completely for at least a couple of weeks, and then you rotate it, or do a blood test. Allergies are easy because allergic reactions are instantaneous, so you're going to notice right away. But food intolerances can be much, much more subtle, and the symptoms can play out over the longer term, because the symptoms can be eczema, inflammation of the skin. It doesn't happen immediately. So yeah, unfortunately, it does take a little while. Yulia, question about probiotics. I've been using Proven multivitamin and probiotics. They've been really helpful. How long do you take them for? Good question. So not forever is the answer. I think people got really excited about probiotics and just kept taking them. Proven recommend a 3-month course. And most of the research that's been done on the benefits of probiotics will recommend a 3-month course. Because of our lifestyles, and because we tend to live in a way that doesn't necessarily support our microbiomes fully, you probably will want to take them again after that. But you can take them for 3 months, and then you can have a break for 3 months, and then you can take them again for another couple of months. I do it like that. I do it on rotation, and particularly with the kids, because I don't want them developing a bacterial overgrowth by putting in too much bacteria. So yeah, we'll do either like a month on, a month off, or a couple of months on, a couple of months off. If you stop taking them and the symptoms start to return, then that's a good indication that you should pick them up again. But yeah, usually about that. Oh, a lot of these are just hellos. Good, Sue, glad I can be helpful. Fantastic. Any other questions? What I'll do is I'll post the guide that contains sort of a lot of the information that I've just been through below, so you can kind of work through that at your own pace. I'm going to the video is recorded, so I'll send that out later. So if you've been listening and you've been thinking, that's helpful, but you've been kind of clocking in and clocking out because other stuff's going on, do watch the replay and do get in touch. Again, even if it's something that I can't help with, I'll know someone who I can refer you to, and I'd be very, very happy to do that. Thank you so much, guys. If there's no other questions, then I'm going to call it a night. It's getting late. And I will email the replay to you tomorrow. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone, as well. All right, see you soon. Bye.